as you all come in and settle in for what promises to be a really important, informative evening. I am Cantor Meredith Greenberg, and really, really grateful for this space, this continued dialogue for the season we've been calling Temple Talks. Of course, we've moved virtually. I want to invite everyone tonight, before we jump into our keynote speaker, I want to just invite everyone to arrive. You know, you have had a long day, no doubt, as we all have each day, and that we've come together tonight because we want to understand and know and be more and better informed about the path in front of us. But first, let's just settle and be present and still for a moment at exactly the place we are in. So maybe just even close your eyes for a moment and take the time to notice, here I am, Hineni, I'm available, I'm here, and I'm going to present with the fullness of my heart as much listening and willingness to hear facts and the information I need to keep myself safe and others. Just be present with this moment. So again, welcome. We are so fortunate that at Temple Ner Tamid, we have the wonderfully talented and multifaceted Bud Mishkin, who has given us so much of his expertise over these last many years. A moderator and journalist and just great thinker. And we are really grateful for his time and energy tonight as he has a dialogue one-to-one with Maya Lordo, who is in the room with us as well, the Essex County Health Officer. And before I invite them officially on screen to start their talk, I just want to give one big shout out, as always, to Carrie Shavat, who is really behind the scenes with all of these Temple Talks, devotes his time, his love, his energy for both Ner Tamid and for the sake of doing repair in the world. So thank you, Carrie. So glad that some of you are here by Zoom and others joining us by YouTube. And without further ado, welcome, welcome Bud Mishkin and Maya Lordo.
We have it. We're on.
We're
Excellent.
on.
Thank you, Cantor. Maya, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. Let's get right to it. As far as Essex County is concerned, where are we right now in terms of coronavirus?
So right now, our cases are definitely on the decline. We have been one of the highest counties for, I want to say, for the last few weeks, as far as cases are concerned, as far as from the state. We have 5 different satellite sites for testing. All of our results that are coming back, the numbers are definitely going down. But we're in a situation where we're following the governor's directives. And before I begin, I just want to say where we are in Essex County is we are probably one of the most proactive and most forward-thinking counties, in the sense that we are doing a large-scale testing. We are mandating employee testing into the county, and we are also making sure that social distancing and all the precautions from the CDC and NJDOH are followed. And the person that we need to thank for that is our county executive, Joseph DiVincenzo, because without his leadership, we would not be here. He has been proactive, he has been attentive, and he has been forward-thinking with everything that we have been going through. He has daily calls with his directors And we are making sure that everyone on our teams and everyone on his team knows what's going on between all the different departments. We coordinate with each other. And I think Essex County as a whole, being one of the most populous counties, we need to be attentive to everything that we do. But go ahead.
Well, the first question is, with this news cycle right now, unrelenting, for want of a better term, because of the protests and coronavirus and kind of mixed together coronavirus, I think people would be well served just to kind of get an overview right now of what is open, what is not open, what are the precautions people should still be taking, what are the precautions that are different from, shall we say, late March?
So let's all take a step back. Let's all think to February. Everybody was going to a restaurant. Everybody was going to the movie theater. Nobody thought twice about shaking hands. I want to ask you the last time that you shook hands with someone. I want everyone to kind of take a step back and understand where we are as an individual, right? So where we were in March, we were still learning. The guidance was constantly changing. Wear a face mask, don't wear a face mask. With that being said, I think, first of all, let's discuss what's open. So we are in phase 2. So we began with all of our parks being closed, all of our playgrounds being closed, schools are closed, movie theaters are closed, restaurants are closed. So now we're in this phase 2 area where we have restaurants are being open for 50% capacity for outside dining. We have summer camps that are opening up July 6th. We have medium contact sports that are being allowed. We have parks that are open now. We have pools starting to open up. We have we also have the next phase within on June 22nd. We're going to have hair salons opening up, and then also indoor dining opening up as well. So with that being said, we as a kind of a community are still in that phase where we're taking precautions on our own. So are we shaking hands? Probably not. Are we all masking? Most of us are, depending on, what guidance you're following. But as the county is concerned, we are requiring face coverings in all of our parks and also in our public and county facilities. So as far as, us moving into the different phases, I think from the last, I want to say almost 100 days, we've learned how to socially distance. We've learned how to take those precautions. So I think as we continue to move forward, we do have that kind of, I want to say social etiquette. I want to call it COVID etiquette that we're using to protect ourselves. Is some of the guidance going to change? I'm sure of it as we continue to go on. But right now, we face cover, we socially distance, we do 50% capacity. We have a lot of areas that are using plexiglass. We are trying to limit the amount of cash exchange, so we're using credit cards.
Right.
It's some of it, and obviously the common sense things, hand washing. You see hand sanitizer everywhere. You may think twice about touching a doorknob. You may use your elbow. And these are things that we may have been doing unconsciously, but now I think we're more aware of even the surfaces that we're coming in contact with. I remember I was taking a walk with my husband, and we were in the park, and I leaned up against a railing, and I said, and I'm kind of more aware of what am I, like, should we be hand sanitizing? But that's also a good thing for us to kind of continue to do. Where are we placing our hands? What are we doing? And the other thing is touching our face too. A lot of us weren't aware of that. And that's something we're becoming aware of more and more.
I ask this for selfish reasons. What constitutes a medium contact sport? So
a medium contact sport would be like a baseball, or something of that nature. And then with that, and then there's also practice and things of practice of sports. And then tennis is allowed, right? And then golf, that's a low medium sport. So golf courses are open. Before, when we were in phase 1, we were only allowing one person per cart. We were also allowing only two people per one tee time. And so those things are just changing. But the thing is, those things are changing weekly. And I think I just want to talk about some of the challenges that we, as businesses and counties and municipalities are facing, because we are going week to week. And sometimes in a county so large as Essex County, we're making adjustments. And like I said earlier, one of the advantages of the way that our county executive has been leading us is we're in constant contact with each other. So the health department is in contact with our parks department and our recs department and public and DPW and public works. And I think that is what has allowed the county to open a little bit easier than some. So our zoo is opening on the 19th.
Turtleback?
Yeah, Turtleback Zoo is opening. It is a limited capacity, but they are open and ready to welcome families from all over.
When you say medium contact sports, I wonder if 60-year-old men playing basketball, or whether that constitutes medium contact, or because I have me and my friends and I are obviously, actually, I'm kidding, but it's serious business. The notion of being without sports or playing sports for so long, it's like, you want to be smart, of course, but you want to get back to doing the things you love too. And there's one of the many balancing acts that we're living with right now.
I think balancing act is a good way to put it, but I think balancing and accepting are two things. And I'm going to thank Cantor for kind of taking a minute to breathe and accept. I think those were some of the things that when I was coming in contact with, explaining to, different entities, like, no, we're not allowed to do this. We're in a point where we need to take a breath and accept where we are, and then just kind of take it in and wait, and then continue to move on and open slowly. Because you can see some of the states that are opening a little bit quicker than us are showing those consequences of those large spikes.
Is there a plan already in place? We're living with this notion of there's going to be a second spike. Even if we do our due diligence and do the right things, so to speak, the notion of something happening later in the year, perhaps the fall, we're living with that kind of over our heads. Is there a plan already in place for when or if that happens?
I think this is the same. So is there a plan? I think the plans are being made as we're going along. I think the plans are being made when you're seeing social distancing at different places, when you're seeing putting up plexiglass, when you're seeing different types of precautions that are being taken, for example, by appointment only establishments, like some of the county facilities that are only allowing by appointment only for certain services. That plan has been developed over the last couple of months that we've been dealing with this. I also think from a social perspective, we're developing our own plans. As a family, we know that, maybe we're not going to go and see grandma because she's highly susceptible. And so if that second spike does occur, we actually are a little bit of an advantage because we have been dealing with this for the past few months, and we do have the resources. We know that we have to wear face coverings if we can't socially distance. We know that maybe we shouldn't go see our elderly population because they are at a higher risk. So if that spike does occur, I'm very confident that, and I'm hoping from an Essex County perspective, we're doing enough to be able to kind of quell that. And some of the things we are doing, for example, we do have temperature checks at all of our county facilities.
Right.
If you do go to the Turtleback Zoo, you will, as you enter a tent where your temperature will be taken. We do have resources for individuals to go ahead and get tested. So I think we've been developing this plan as we've been going on because this situation has been evolving so quickly. I think we're also very well aware of where we're supposed to kind of protect ourselves. And I'm hoping that education is really going to be the case here, and having these kinds of conversations within the community is going to be very important. I think reaching out to your local health departments is going to be very important too, and using them as a resource. But you said with all the mass media that's been going out, I think what's really important for the community to understand is we really need to get those sources that are really relevant. So if you're going to go and look for information about COVID, let's try to stick to the CDC. Let's try to stick to NADOH, and let's try to limit and I'm not saying you can't go ahead and look at what you want, but let's go to those reliable sources and kind of gauge ourselves from there.
Right. We will be taking your questions, I believe, in the chat room. So if you want to put your questions in the chat room, we'll get to that before the hour is over. Testing. First of all, questions about testing. First of all, can you give us the numbers? How many sites? Where can people go in the Bloomfield, Montclair area for testing, both coronavirus testing and also antibody testing?
So first off, get tested. That's right now is my kind of mantra. So let's discuss the two types of testing that we do have. Okay, so everyone's been hearing antibody, everyone's been hearing PCR. So I'm going to first talk about the type of testing there is, and then I'll talk about the availability of it within the county. So first we have our PCR testing, which some of us have heard are the nasal swab and then also the saliva testing. So those are the two tests that are considered diagnostic tests, which are the ones that are accepted as whether you are positive for COVID or you are negative for COVID. Okay, so these are the diagnostic tests that are accepted by the New Jersey Department of Health and the CDC.
Right.
Now we have the antibody test. So everybody's like, is this antibody testing? Is this PCR testing? So, and I'm looking at some of the questions. So, so PCR is a DNA replication test, which actually denotes whether the virus is present. That's what PCR testing is. The antibody testing is a test that is a screening tool to be able to see whether or not you have been exposed to the virus. So the swab testing or the diagnostic testing is if you currently have it, and the antibody testing, it says if you have been exposed to the virus.
Right.
Doesn't mean that you're not currently infected with it, but it says you've been exposed. So with the antibody testing, there's four types of results. There's negative. So if you're negative on an antibody test, that means it doesn't mean at this current time, you have no antibodies, and we are taking into account that you have not been exposed to the virus. The next is called an Igm positive, which is an acute stage, which means you've just recently been exposed to the virus, and you may be either non-symptomatic and sick and shedding the virus, or you're in the kind of middle stage of the virus and you may be showing symptoms. The next one is an IgM IgG antibody confirmative, which means that you're in the post-acute kind of stage. You're kind of at the last 10 days of the virus and you may be showing it. The last one is your IgG, which is the one that everyone's kind of looking for to show if you have this post-acute exposure, which tentatively may mean you may be immune or have some slight immunity to the virus. The one thing with the antibody testing is they're not sure how long the antibodies last for. So you might test positive with this IgG, and then 3 months later, you may not have it at all because it may be gone. So those are kind of the things that this is why the antibody test is not currently used as to confirm whether you have the virus or not.
So if someone is completely asymptomatic, there's no notion that, I'll take me, not been sick at all, completely asymptomatic. Is there any negative in me going to any of the testing sites because I may be around people who may have the virus?
So 35% of all positives as per CDC, are asymptomatic.
Right.
So you could be asymptomatic, yet you may still be able to spread the virus, which
Okay.
is why we are asking individuals to wear the face covering. And the face covering is actually to protect surfaces and others around us, because as we speak, we may have saliva that may come out if we sneeze. And if you're around a vulnerable population, they may get infected, right? So if you are indeed asymptomatic and you have no symptoms at all, we still need to go ahead and get tested, because you may be positive and you may have no knowledge of that. So with that is why you should go ahead and take advantage of the testing sites, for example, that are offered in Essex County.
Right.
So the county is offering free testing. You do not need insurance. The county is taking all of the price for that onto the county, and we are using our availability of testing locations to be able to do that. So we currently have a site at Weequahic Park, which is in Newark, which is 2 days a week, which is every Monday and every Friday. And that is from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. I'm sorry, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then we have different satellite sites 3 days a week that you can go ahead and make an appointment on. So in order to make an appointment, you have to go onto EssexCovid.org, EssexCovid.org, and you can go ahead and make an appointment if you're an Essex County resident. And if you're an Essex County resident, it's free of charge, and you will be tested and you will get your results. You will get a phone call, and you will also get your results emailed to you.
Okay. A couple other specific questions before we get to the questions in the chat room, of which there are many, and that's great. People coming into your home, understanding that we're not going to visit the elderly because they're obviously a most vulnerable category. Should we in Essex County at this point be allowing people into our homes? Maybe there's work to be done on a part of the home. Should we be going to other people's homes? Assuming we're wearing masks and doing all of that, should we now be able to have people into our homes or not?
So I think that's a really interesting question, and I think a lot of individuals are asking that. I think my recommendation is if you do have outdoor space, might be a good idea to be able to utilize that area,
right?
Especially if you haven't seen someone in a long time. If you do choose to go ahead and, invite people into your home, or you may have individuals working on your home, you might need to get your air conditioner fixed because it's summertime, right? I think you need to use the precautions, and I don't think anyone should ever feel as though they don't have the right to say, you know what, if you do come in, please wear a mask.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I think that's something that's one of those weird things that it's like, do we tell them? Do we not tell them? It's your home.
Yeah.
So
I think we're well past that point, certainly in New Jersey, and just as much for the person coming in as it is for the person who's living in the home.
So I think, we need to respect each other's decisions as it comes to walking into someone's home. If you are invited into that individual's home, I think the first thing you should do is walk into their house and wash your hands. I think it's just a normal thing to do. And then, just kind of have that conversation. Listen, I don't have a problem sitting at a further away distance from you, whatever it may be. If you have children and they're, coming to play with each other, maybe there's, they kind of keep their own toys to themselves and they don't share toys. So I think there needs to be something that's developed upon yourself and kind of making your own decisions on that. But I think welcoming people into your house is, not an issue, but you do need to understand that the precautions need to be taken. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, when the individuals leave, you go ahead and you sanitize surfaces just as you would normally clean your table as you would normally. You just take a little bit more precaution with it.
Another specific topic you mentioned earlier, summer camps. This is major.
Huge.
Tell me what kind of summer camps you're talking about that are opening.
So all summer camps are actually opening. So some of the precautions that are being taken is that, for example, if there are no contact, there's really no like serious contact activities being done. There are no field trips that are being conducted. If there is pickup and drop off by a bus, that bus is sanitized regularly. Also, there's no intermingling of groups. So, I mean, I went to camp and I know like at the end of the year, you had like color wars or whatever it may be. So that's no longer an activity that's allowed. So you kind of stay within your group. Temperatures are being taken of both staff and campers coming in. There's also isolation procedures. So if you go to sleepaway camp, for example, those are allowed, but they need to make sure that they present isolation procedures for an individual, for a camper, or even a staff member that does need to get sick. So you need to have a particular location for that.
I was going to ask you, how many are we talking about sleepaway camps and day camps here? And what's the percentages?
I think they're all allowed to open as far as summer camps are concerned, but they are limiting capacity for certain camps. I'm not sure which ones though at this point.
All right, but you're including sleepaway camps.
Yeah, yep, sleepaway camps, and those are the ones that the guidance came out that there need to be quarantine and isolation facilities until that camper or that staff member is able to be removed from the camp.
Right, because that was a tough call. I know in the Reformed Jewish world, when they announced that all the URJ camps were closed for the summer, that was, I mean, it was understandable, and no one's questioning the decision. I don't think they are, but that was not a happy day.
I was a camp counselor at Camp Ramah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm a product of the union camp. So, what are the myths that are out there that you have the floor right now to dispel?
The myths. I think we're too soon to be discussing myths. I think what we do need to be discussing is the one thing I did mention is where we're getting our information from.
Right.
I think if we're going to talk about myths and we're going to talk about different things, I think mass information is one of them. I think the amount of information that we're getting and all the different studies and all these different, treatments, like I think I saw like, I don't know, like rice cures COVID, or I don't know, like all these weird things, that you're coming about. The one myth that I think we need to dispel is that we're not going to know everything about this now, and that's something we're going to need to accept. Right. There needs to be a lot more data that's collected over a longer period of time in order for us to truly give accurate and science-based answers to certain questions. The one thing I do want to, because since I do have the floor, I want to say one thing. I want for everyone, and yes, please understand that the nurses, the doctors, our first responders, firemen, police have been at the forefront of this. But I think what's not being mentioned enough is our public health workers, our health officers, our health inspectors, our public health nurses that are working in your local health departments. These individuals have been working. I have been working pretty much nonstop, but your local health departments in Essex County have been working nonstop since this. And many of you may not know this, but your local health departments are the ones that investigate every single positive confirmed case within your town. So there's an individual in Montclair, in Bloomfield, there's a public health nurse or a public health investigator or a health inspector that is sitting there and making those calls and doing that contact tracing. So if I had one message to give, I think we really need to give a big shout out to our local and public health departments for being able, they were really the ones driving a lot of the data that you guys are getting. They're the ones collecting it. They're the ones submitting it to the state. So if I had one thing to say, I would say shout out to our local health departments.
Okay. All right, let's get to your questions and we'll try and get to them as many as possible, obviously. Richard asks, which cities in the county have the most cases of the virus?
That would be Newark. New York City does. I apologize, you do not have the numbers on me right now, but at
That's
the
okay.
current, yeah, but they do, they are one of our highest. They are the highest in the county.
Okay. Nancy writes or asks, what can you share about the opening of schools in the fall? What is the relationship of the county health department to school districts, and how will the two interact to share information about COVID-19 trends as the year progresses?
So right now, currently, I don't think we have an exact opening plan for schools in New Jersey. That hasn't been established yet. But the connection between the schools and the local schools is we do have a county superintendent, and that county superintendent then meets with all the local superintendents. And that is, they have a meeting, I believe, almost once a month, where they go ahead and coordinate their activities. And I think the way that Department of Education is going to overlay their plan, and then within the county, they're going to make their decisions from, within the superintendents at this point.
Do you get any sense of what I hate to use the expression, a drop dead day, but a deadline for here, we're making the decision by this day, whether it's going to be in person or remote?
That I cannot answer to you because I do not know that. And I don't think the state has announced that yet either.
Right.
So we haven't.
Right. Okay. Let's see. We already discussed what does PCR stand for. Okay, we got that. Susan asks, our son has just returned to Seattle to clean out his college apartment. What, you were supposed to do that in college? I didn't know that. Clean out of the apartment? Who knew 40 years ago? Anyway, our son has just returned to Seattle to clean out his college apartment. When he returns home to New Jersey, how shall we quarantine him, and for how long? And how often shall we have him tested? Those are good questions.
So what I would do is when he does come back from Seattle, you can go ahead and when he returns, so depending on how long he's been in Seattle. So if he went to Seattle 3 days ago, so you can include that in that 14-day quarantine, right, that we talked about. But he doesn't have to be quarantined unless he has been in contact with somebody who is a confirmed positive. Okay, so we will not recommend any type of quarantine. But what I would recommend is that within 7 days or 8 days of his return, he does take advantage of the testing that's available either through your doctor or through the county or even your municipality, and go ahead and get tested. And he should get tested 7 or 14 days upon from the time that he was in Seattle to the time he comes back, or whatever that time lapse is.
Okay. Karen asks, why don't face masks protect the wearer?
I think that's one thing that we need to just discern. I think depending on the type of face mask. So if you have an N95 mask, right? So those are the ones that you see and the ones that have been in high supply. They actually do protect the wearer. And those are the ones designed for lower particles going in. So I'm not sure about that question as to why they don't protect the wearer. I also think it does depend on the type of exposure that you have and how close you are to the exposure. So I'm not sure how to answer that particular question.
Okay, question is, if I wear a mask regularly and test negative for the disease, how often should I be tested?
So the testing recommendation at this current time is, so the incubation period, so the time it takes for the virus to present itself is 14 days. The recommendation for testing is, one, if you're symptomatic. So if you have fever, chills, sneezing, diarrhea, loss of taste and smell, you can go ahead and get tested immediately. And as far as a regular testing schedule, I mean, in the beginning, you can go 14 days. And then if you want to go in another 14 days, you can go ahead and do that. If you test negative in both of those, unless again, you come in contact with a confirmed positive, you can go every 28 days. And it's not a recommendation. It's something that you may want to think about as a time schedule.
Right. This is somewhat similar, comes from Perry. If we are asymptomatic, why should we be tested? If we are tested, how often do we need to be tested to be sure that we still aren't carrying the virus?
So there you go. So back to this asymptomatic, right?
Right.
So there have been cases where individuals have tested positive for 70 days. So that's one of the unknown things when it comes to this virus. Certain individuals carry and shed the virus for a lot longer than others. So the testing really has to do with two things. One is, what is your level of contact with vulnerable populations? Are you working? So right now, the recommendation for anybody who's working in a long-term care facility is to get tested pretty much every 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on why you feel you need to get tested. If you are indeed asymptomatic and you went ahead and got tested and you're negative after 14 days, and then you go ahead and get tested again for another 14 days and you're negative again. I mean, if you, again, are working in a population where you could infect someone and you're nervous, you may be living with elderly parents who you're a caregiver for. That's a very important reason that you would want to go ahead and get tested. Some of the reasons you may want to get tested is because your employer is asking you to do it to return to work. So those are different reasons that we might all consider getting tested. But I think, at this point, I think we need to understand what, number one, what our level of risk is. So if you yourself have some underlying health conditions, if you, for example, have any kind of heart conditions, kidney conditions, or any respiratory issues, you might want to consider going ahead and getting tested a little bit more regularly than somebody who may not have any underlying conditions.
Okay, we have a bunch more questions, so let's get to them. Andrew asks, what are the lines/wait times like at these testing sites? Is there a plan regarding public transportation with buses and trains? And how can there be social distancing once businesses open and buses and trains are typically full as they were pre-COVID? That's a whole bunch of stuff. Let's try to unpack a couple of those.
Let's do transportation.
Okay,
let's start there. So transportation, I'm not sure what New Jersey Transit has as far as a plan is concerned. I haven't seen anything in my own kind of physical way. But the one thing I will say is that I have to say, I think people are going to do it on their own. I think when people are going to get onto that public transportation, they're going to attempt to socially distance, because we do know that's something that we're going to, we have to kind of do right now. But I don't know, and I'm hoping that individuals will, to an extent, take it onto their own. I'm pretty sure that, maybe face masks will be a requirement, which I don't know if that's the case right now, but it may be. I'm sure that, New Jersey Transit or whoever it is, or any bus companies, are going to start to sanitize, different types of areas within the buses. I also think maybe the transaction of the fare might change. So maybe a lot of the bus companies may go to an app version of it, because some of them, some of the smaller bus companies do have, just an actual money exchange. So maybe they'll go over to that. But I think from as far as a public transportation perspective, I think we need to also take some responsibility there and understand that if, maybe the bus is too full, maybe you need to wait for the next one. Or, and I know it's tough. Trust me, I know, trying to get into the city or whatever it may be. But I think those are going to be guidelines that I think the, public transportation is going to have to make on their own.
Quickly, what are the lines and wait times like at these testing sites?
So we have been measuring our testing times. So we have two different types of sites that we run. So different types of testing. One is the nasal swab, which is a nasopharyngeal swab. And then we also have a saliva test. The longest wait time that we had at and this was when we were very busy, was about 45 minutes. And the current wait time at one of our saliva tests is about 30 minutes.
Okay. Back to the transportation. This is part of a bigger issue of, will businesses return to, their offices in Midtown Manhattan, or will people work from home? And that's part of that's a societal topic, not just a New Jersey or Essex County topic. But occasionally I think about times I've been on the train. This is all, of course, pre-COVID, when it's been packed to the gills because a train breaks down, or because I didn't have enough engineers, and the notion in that moment, or with those memories of trying to social distance when you're packed like a New York City subway, old days. I don't know how that's going to work. Again,
so I grew up in Brooklyn. Okay. I remember taking the subway into the city all the time.
Which subway stop?
86th Street, actually. I grew up in Bay Ridge. So.
Excellent.
Yep. So I think that one of the things, it's going to be really tough. And I think we're also, it's and this is, an opinion of mine. We're going to almost have to change things upstream in order to change the downstream transportation. And what I'm meaning is, by saying that, is perhaps one is going to be like what time you have to get to work. Like if you mandatorily have to get to work at 8:30, perhaps that's going to change, that you have to get to work between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, giving you the and that's just an opinion that I have. And those are the upstream changes that I think may be coming, is the structure of how we're shaping our work days, or whatever it may be, in order to accommodate for the social distancing. Because why is everybody getting onto a train and stuffing themselves as a sardine? Because they have to get to work at 8:30.
Right. Okay, let's move on. No, it's part of a much bigger issue about whether people are going to work from home, continue to work from home, whether businesses are going to want to have those 2 floors in Midtown Manhattan, or like, why do we need those 2 floors in Midtown Manhattan? I'm paying a boatload of rent on those things. Anyway, okay. Jody asks, what is the point of getting tested if we don't know what to do with that information and we aren't sure the tests are even reliable?
So as far as the reliability of the tests, I think currently they, especially the ones with the nasal swab, and we've been using the saliva testing, which is pretty much 99.6% accurate. So I'm not sure what you mean. What are you doing with that testing? I think it's more of there's a lot of things you can do with the testing. First off, there's a lot of return to work policy that's requiring testing. So that's one. 2, again, as I mentioned, interaction with vulnerable populations. That's 2. I also think understanding when you are getting tested, it is a point in time test. So it's really that day that you're testing positive. So from that day, you need to take the precautions. So I just want to explain to everyone, a lot of individuals may have questions like, what if I am asymptomatic? I then go ahead and get tested. What do I do with myself now? So at this point, and maybe that's what she's trying to ask, like, what do we do with this information?
Right.
So the recommendation from CDC and NJDOH is that you will isolate yourself for 10 days and then do an extra 30 days of precautionary isolation. Right. So the other thing I think individuals need to understand, there's a difference between the word isolation and quarantine. If you are isolated, that means you have the virus and you have tested positive. You will then isolate yourself from everyone around you. If you are in quarantine, you are waiting for that 14-day incubation period to pass to see if you present symptoms or not. So I think that sometimes causes a little bit of question, isolation, quarantine. Quarantine does not necessarily mean that you have the virus. And after that 14 days, you may want to go ahead and get tested.
Okay. Jody is asking, which company makes the PCR and the antibody tests that the county uses? And what is the data on false negatives and false positives for this testing?
So I'm going to say that the county is not currently offering any antibody testing at any of our sites. So I can't answer that particular question. And as far as the tests that are being, the PCR or the nasal swab tests, we're using the Rutgers saliva tests, which are the ones from Accurate Diagnostics that that was on the cover of Rutgers, I think, Alumni Magazine the other day. Those are the saliva tests that we're using. They're from Accurate Diagnostics from Spectrum.
Okay. I think it's Andrew who has more of a statement than a question, and that is that buses were full going into the city pre-COVID. It's literally impossible to socially distance unless there are more buses/trains added to the system. Again, that's part of a much bigger conversation about financing and where New Jersey Transit is at and so on. Andrew, not sure if it's the same Andrew, asks, how long does it take after testing to get back results?
So I will say that right now, the saliva tests that we have been doing has been 48 hours. And full disclosure with the nasal swab test, we're using BioReference. It is the same state, it is the same lab that the state is using. It's a little bit backed up. So we're going between 4 to 8 days on return of test.
Okay. We have a string of Andrews here, or one person with a lot of questions. That's okay. I was told with my antibody testing to make sure it is a Roche or Abbott to make sure I am less likely to get a false positive. Is that still true?
So Andrew, I am not able to comment on that because I do not have all the full data on the Abbott or the Roche testing. And they haven't been around enough. And the other thing I want to note is that they are FDA approved only under the emergency authorization approval, which means that at this current time, they did not go through the full FDA process. So I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Miriam asks, if guests come into your house and socially distance appropriately, do you need to be concerned that germs could stay in the air in the house? If so, for what length of time? For any length.
So at the current time, COVID is not proven to be spread is not airborne. But the recommendations for reopening does include ventilation. So being that we are in the summer months, it does make it a little bit easier to ventilate your home. So perhaps if you do have guests over your house, using a fan, opening some windows, and again, using the outdoor space that you may have in your home and allowing that to be where you entertain or meet and greet guests.
Okay, we have another question. Do you think businesses should require their employees to be tested before they go back to work?
So I'm going to say this, that the county is doing mandatory return to work testing. I believe that any business that does take a lot of interaction with the public, as the county does, it is the responsibility of that business owner to ensure that their employees are, number one, healthy, number two, safe, and number three, are not infecting anyone or that their customers, are making sure that their customers are safe. I cannot speak upon other people's policies, but I will speak upon the way that the county is thinking about its employees, and it's both to keep its employee force healthy, and then it's also to keep the public safe. So I'm just going to give an example. If an individual is asymptomatic and has not been at work for X amount of time, and now returns to work, and continues to, to do their duties and has not been tested. The first 2 or 3 days at work, they're interacting with their other coworkers and maybe they're interacting with the public, and they did not get tested. That kind of leaves all those options open, whether they're positive or they're negative for the virus. I think just for a return to work policy, I think it's just something that may keep the employer and kind of have an even keel of what it looks like from a disease prevalence perspective. So one of the reasons that the county is testing is because we would like to see what our overall prevalence looks like. So from a county level. So right now on June 29th, let's say everyone returns to work, we're able to see what it looks like from a general view of how many infections we have. And right now the rates are low. But when we talked about that surge, if all of a sudden we start seeing a spike in our employee positives, that may give us, some indication and help us to take proactive measures a lot quicker than if we didn't have an understanding of what our disease prevalence looked like.
Maya, can you give us some example or paint a picture for us from a public policy standpoint, what it was like to be on the inside, so to speak, during the worst of COVID, late March, early April?
So as this kind of, I don't want to say slows down, but things are changing. Right. I think one of the things that I can remember, and this I will remember forever when it comes to COVID. I remember it was 11 o'clock at night. And I remember nobody was particularly sure of what was going on. And all you heard was, there's a case here, there's 3 cases in here and 2 cases here. And it was 11 o'clock at night. And I got a phone call because my cell phone for work was, the way that I was able to be reached. And I remember I had a nurse from a hospital, and she just started crying. She goes, "I don't know what to do. All I know is that I have 3 positives and I don't know who to talk to and I don't know who to call. And I am just so scared." And I think that is that is from that day on, I think I realized that I will take a phone call at 1 o'clock at night. I will take a call until 12 o'clock. This is from a public health perspective, this is our jobs. And I think being in the beginning of all of this, I think the level of uncertainty was really the scary thing, because we did not really know what we were dealing with. And I think that came from everybody. You started hearing all these numbers, all these cases were rising. Then you started hearing about Italy and all these people on ventilators. And the level of fear and uncertainty was really what I think I can say was really where I said to myself, I said, it's my job to be able to talk to that nurse at 11 o'clock and say to her, you have somebody to reach out to. Right. And that's why I say we really need to give a large amount of credit to our public health and our health departments, because they were getting the same calls that I was getting at 11 o'clock at night from that same hospital nurse saying, I just don't know what to do.
There is so much talk about how this time is unprecedented. It's a word you hear quite often in the media and print journalism and broadcast, radio and TV, that these are unprecedented times. But for you as a health official, is there any lesson that you have been able to use during this time that comes from a previous experience? Or is this an entirely new ballgame?
Okay, I'm gonna take a minute and I'm gonna talk it through with you, but okay.
Okay.
I think first of all, there's 2 sides of this. As far as a public health official, this is a Super Bowl.
Right.
Okay, so we're pretty good here. It doesn't really get any more public health than a pandemic.
Right.
Um,
In our house, we would refer to it as the Stanley Cup final, but I get the reference.
so I don't even watch sports.
Okay.
But the one thing, but as a public health official, I don't think that I've ever experienced anything like this. I mean, we've had Ebola, we've had H1N1, we've dealt with it. You know, we've had outbreaks before. I think as a public health official, for myself, the one I've never really had, you know, we of course you have to make decisions, but I think within this pandemic and this situation, you have to understand that you need to be able to, number one, make decisions because you're the one that people are looking at. And those decisions have better be based in fact and data. Mm-hmm. There is no way that then that is really what my major lesson in all of this has been, is that, you know what, rather say you don't know than go ahead and say something that is not double, triple, or quadruple checked, because then that's not public health.
Mm-hmm. Let's get one more question in as we come down the stretch here. Sarah, getting back to specifics, specific information. Sarah asks, what do you do to treat yourself if you test positive and you get symptoms?
So there are currently no treatments that are approved for COVID. You know, just like a virus that you may have, you go ahead and you rest, and you know, if you do have a fever, you're more, you know, you go ahead and take Tylenol or an anti-fever reducing, you know, over the counter. And I think one of the things that we need to understand is we need to, you know, heal our bodies. And if you are feeling sick where you have terrible respiratory issues or something of that nature, please go to the hospital. Make sure you call ahead and you say, listen, I think I may have COVID symptoms, so they can properly get you into the hospital and properly treat you without contaminating the hospital. And that goes with anything. So if you do feel sick or you believe that you do have COVID, so even if you're going to go to your regular doctor, you should go ahead and call ahead and let them know that that's the situation so they can prepare for it. But, you know, like I said, there is no treatment at this current time. And if you are feeling sick and you are having trouble breathing and you have some underlying health conditions, please go ahead and call your doctor. And then that you know, if you don't have a primary care physician, you can go ahead and call and go to the hospital. But again, call ahead and let them know what's going on.
Well, Maya, we really thank you, A, for your work and the work of your colleagues, B, for being with us tonight and giving us tangible, specific information to these specific questions, and also for your reflections on what this time is like, be it the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup playoffs, or whatever. We get it. This is obviously an historic and unprecedented time. And so thank you for being with us tonight. And we really appreciate it. And one last thing, if people have other questions, that something comes up in 10 minutes, oh, I forgot to ask about the website, places they can go to get information.
So first off, I want to say, please, if you want to get tested, all of our testing locations are on essexcovid.org. So that's essexcovid.org. You can go ahead, take a look at the different locations that we offer, and go ahead and register yourself for testing. That's first. And if you have any other questions, you can go ahead and look up the health department on our county website. My email is available there. But you know what? If you want to forward your questions to the Cantor, and then maybe the Cantor and me could have, we can have an exchange, and maybe we can go ahead and I can keep in contact with the temple, and maybe, if they have any questions, they can reach out directly to me.
All right, we appreciate that. And we always appreciate the work of Carrie Shavat, who prepares and arranges these events, who is always thinking about the greater good of the Montclair and the Montclair area community and Temple Ner Tamid. So Carrie, thank you again. Cantor, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bud and Maya, and to all of the really thoughtful questions in the chat, which really drove the conversation forward. Maya, we will be careful what you wish for, because we will likely be, knocking on your door with some questions in the future. But of course, our community's health and safety is our top priority. And as we as a community struggle with what are the right measures for our specific set of circumstances, we just want you all to know that we pray together that we will be able to return more and more to the reason and to the drive that brought us together in the first place, to make community, to be together, to be safe and healthy, and to really elevate all the good that's in each of us. So Lila Tove, thank you again, and stay safe. We'll see you soon.
Stay safe and healthy, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.